Hello, Intuitive Religion, and welcome to this short presentation on the background to the next book that we're going to be reading for our next class session. This book, The Goddess Lives in Upstate New York. So we are going to start reading this book for our next class session, and I wanted to give you an introduction to some of the main concepts in the book before we start reading it so that you're not completely gobsmacked by those things. And in fact, the first thing I want to point out to you is that this book, over here on this side, this book helpfully contains a glossary of unfamiliar terms. So your first resource, if you don't know what something is to look in the glossary. Make sure that you do that. However, I do understand there's a lot of new content coming at you, so I want to give you a little heads up on some things. So let's first talk about where this temple is. We're going to be reading about a temple to the goddess Shri Rajarajeshwari, and I apologize that I get tongue-tied saying Sanskrit words. I don't know Sanskrit, and so the pronunciations are unfamiliar to me. I'm going to do my very best. Shri Rajarajeshwari is the goddess who lives in upstate New York, and so what I want to do first is show you where her temple is, and then give you a sense of where the community that worships at that temple is located. So go with me real quick on a journey. We're going to start where we are. So here we are. This is Washburn University. Here's Topeka, Kansas. This is us. And we're going to fly across America to the general vicinity of Rochester, New York. So there we are. There goes my ancestral homeland of Cleveland, Ohio. The temple is located in the vicinity of Rochester, which is a medium-sized city in upstate New York. It's about an hour and a half from Buffalo and about 3 hours from Toronto. And one of the things you're going to find out is that many of the people who worship at this temple come from Toronto and drive 3 hours just to get there, which ought to give you a sense of just what an interesting place this temple is. Let's look real quick at the temple itself. So we're going to zoom in. You can see that it's not in Rochester, but outside in the suburbs of Rochester. And it's actually pretty far out in the boonies. So there's a small residential neighborhood around it. This is the actual temple. It's in a converted barn on an old farm. And there's a small parking lot and a small driveway. And then there's some residential houses. And you're going to read about some tensions that develops between the local residents and this loud, boisterous, unconventional Hindu temple in their very midst. So I just said the word Hindu, and I want to talk a little bit about that. So this is a Hindu temple, and Hinduism is the main religion that is practiced in India and in Nepal and in other parts of South Asia. And it's also a minority religion in the country of Sri Lanka. And so the community that worships here in particular is from southern India and Sri Lanka. So let's have a look at where they're from before we talk about the particular concepts of their religion. Bear with me a second. Let's go on a journey across the ocean. Here we go. Across the Atlantic, across Europe and North Africa, across Southwest Asia. We are looking at the country of India. So this is the country of India right here. The second most populous country in the world, one of the world's largest countries, and a country that has a large percentage of the world's Hindus living in it. In fact, the word Hindu is derived from the word India. They mean the same thing. They both refer to the Indus River, located over here in what is now Pakistan, which was once part of India. That's a complicated history. Anyway, what I want to talk to you about is the worshippers at this temple hail mostly from, or at least their families hail mostly from southern India and Sri Lanka. So I'm going to zoom in on that. So we're zooming in down a little bit. A word that keeps coming up is the word Tamil. You can see the word Tamil here as part of the name of the province, Tamil Nadu. Tamil is a group of languages that are common to southern India. And they are, it's a term that is used to describe minorities who live in southern India. And so this particular temple in Rochester, New York, serves a community of Tamil-speaking Indians and Sri Lankans who have moved to Canada and the United States, part of the Tamil diaspora in the United States. And so in India, Tamil speakers are a minority, but they practice Hinduism, the same religion as 80% of Indians. In Sri Lanka, that's a bit more complicated. Only about 13% of Sri Lankans are Tamil speakers and practitioners of Hinduism. Sri Lanka is a majority Theravada Buddhist country, and in fact, up until 2009, there was a very violent civil war that killed almost 100,000 Sri Lankans going on between these Tamil-speaking Hindus and the larger population of Buddhists in Sri Lanka. So that's part of the background and context as well. Now, give me a second and I'm going to transition to some PowerPoint slides and give you a little bit of information about Hinduism itself and what you're going to be reading about. So, be right back. And we're back. So I want to talk a little bit about Hinduism. You'll notice here that I've put the word Hinduism in scare quotes, not Hinduism, but Hinduism. And the reason I've done that is because the word Hindu is not native to India. The word Hindu was invented by the British. When the British took over India in the 17 and 1800s, they needed a word to describe the various religions practiced by the millions and now over 1 billion people living on the South Asian continent. And so they invented the word Hinduism as something like Christianity to describe them, except that the term doesn't really fit. Hinduism is a wildly diverse religious tradition. There are many, many, many different ways to be and to do Hinduism, and any attempt at sort of generalizing what Hindus are, what Hindus do, is going to fall short of describing what people do in practice. But I want to talk about some generalities about Hinduism as we're going to see them manifested specifically in this temple in upstate New York. So go with me here just a second. So Hinduism is a major world religion. It has more than 1 billion followers, and a large percentage of those do live in India and Nepal, where they make up about 80% of the population. But there is a diaspora population of several million Hindus living in the United States and in Canada. And this temple to Sri Rajarajeshwari in upstate New York serves that population. So people who originate in India and Sri Lanka, but who have moved to the US and Canada and make their homes here now. But Hinduism is a major world religion. It's concentrated, as I said, in India and Nepal, but exists in diaspora communities in North America, and that's what our focus is. And specifically, this community, oh, just a second, one more thing. Hinduism, you have to understand this, is radically polytheistic. So remember, we talked about sacred power a while back. We talked about monotheism as the worship of one God, and pantheism is the worship that everything is God, and atheism is the belief that there is no God. Polytheism is the belief that there are many gods, and Hinduism is radically polytheistic. There are by some accounts as many as several million different gods that are worshipped in India. Now, most of these gods are differing avatars and manifestations of a relatively limited number of main deities. But it's important to understand that there are lots and lots of different gods. There's no one supreme high god that all Hindus agree is the god to be worshipped. And this particular community that we're talking about, they worship a goddess. They worship the ultimate mother goddess, the principle of Shakti that they believe is the reality behind all of the other gods. And it's called the Srividya tradition. And so Sri Rajarajeshwari is one manifestation of this tradition. And so when we study this temple, we're going to look at the relationship between this goddess and the other deities who are represented in the temple. And so we'll talk about that in class. I want to talk a little bit about what happens in a Hindu temple next. So the major form of worship for Indian deities is what is called puja. Puja is not the only way to worship, but it is a common form of worship that most practitioners of Hinduism would engage in. And puja is basically nothing more and nothing less than having a meal with a god. So you can see here, this is a temple puja, and the god is represented in this statue, and people understand, they don't believe that the statue is literally and entirely the god, but they believe that the god comes to indwell and manifest him or herself in the statue. And so presenting food to the statue is a way of sharing a meal with the god. And so typically a bell is rung to wake the god up, and chants are performed that invite the god to the meal and praise the god. The god is washed and cleansed. And then food of various kinds, so clarified butter called ghee, or fruits or vegetables, rice and things like that. Different gods have different tastes, so you have to know what a particular god likes. Those things are waved in front of the deity during the puja, and then at the end, puja should result in a sense of intimacy with the god that is called darshan, and we'll talk about that in class. But just for now, know, the point of puja is the same reason that you would have dinner with your best friend. It's to talk to them. It's to become intimate with them on a personal level, and that's why people engage in puja. Now, another feature of Hindu temples we're going to talk about is gurus. So a temple will typically have one or more gurus, a person who is a particular repository of wisdom at the temple. And now, not everybody who goes to a temple studies with a guru. Not everybody who goes to a temple is initiated by being given a mantra by the guru. But it is one way that a person can become closer to the gods and can pursue wisdom and enlightenment within the Hindu tradition. Now, the guy pictured here is sort of the classic Western image of what a guru looks like. As you read for today, pay attention to the ways that the guru at the Rush temple to Sri Rajarajeshwari does not fit that particular image of a guru. A final point, there's a mention made of the caste system in today's reading, and I want to briefly talk about what the caste system is, okay? So, it's a misnomer, first of all, that the caste system is some absolute rule that has existed throughout all history. In fact, for the most part, the caste system was only put into place by the British when they took over India. But it's a way of subdividing the population into various classes of people. And so I'm not going to talk about all of these, but at the top we see the Brahmins, the priests. These are the people who run temples. These are the people who get to interact directly with the gods. And typically the Brahmins protect fairly rigorously the secrets that allow them to worship the gods. Watch for how the temple to Sri Rajarajeshwari in Rochester, New York is different from that. Watch for that in the readings. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. Thank you for listening. I hope you got some helpful information, and I will see you in class.